Alrighty, so I got a brand new SLX XT151 here. I am just going to tune her up, man. Make it the way I like it. When they come out of the package from the factory, they got usually a little grease in spots that I don't like it in, and just certain things, so I like to tune them up when I first get them. These are badass little reels, man. This is the 6.3 ratio, and yeah, I'm sure it's perfectly fine to use right out of the box, but I thought this would be a good opportunity to show how to take this reel apart and do a little maintenance on it. So let's get into it. First things first, got this little screw here, get that out. It's been a while since I took a reel apart, actually. Might be a little rusty. It's usually a 10mm nut. And since this is a left-handed reel, all these are lefty-tighty, righty-loosey, which is weird. Should I try to protect this nut a little bit? You can use a plastic bag or like a little cloth or something like that on your tools to make sure you don't scratch up your little nut here. Yeah, it's still scratched it up a little bit, but oh well. You're never going to see that anyway, with the cap on. Handle off. Alright, so this is very much like the BFS reel. Once again, it's got this little washer that sticks to this handle. And underneath here, there is a tiny little pin that makes your drag click. So those little holes there in the washer, they face down, and then the little pin sits right there, if you can see it. I've taken them out in other videos. I am not going to bother this time. It's not so bad, but you just got to be careful, because once you take that out of there, it can go flying. It's just a tiny little pin on a spring, and it's kind of dangerous to mess with, so just know that's in there. Do not lose it. Alright, so I'm going to place that on there. Always place the stuff in the order I found it. Just kind of makes life easier. Alrighty, next up you got your little spring there. Then a little nut here, and you'll notice there is a groove on the top of this nut for the spring to sit flush in. So when you put that back together, make sure that little groove is pointed up. This should kind of just twist right off with not much effort to the right. And underneath this, you're gonna have a couple washers. First one is usually stuck right on that. There's like a copper colored side and a smooth gray metal color side. So just make sure you realize that the gray part was up against the washer and the kind of copper color was facing down. All right, next up we got a couple little spacer washers, and these are usually in a specific pattern opposite each other. Sorry for the traffic noise. It's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. People are starting to hit the road jack. All right, so these two little washers, you could see they're just spacers and they're opposite each other. So it just gives you a little bit of a spring action to them. So just kind of keep them the way you found them. All right, so we're just kind of working our way down here, man. Next up, let's see. It's been a while for me. I guess we'll take the spool out, why not? Little open and close here. Flip that switch to open. Swing the door open. Get the spool out. Just place that there. Lock this back up. Next up, we'll take the tension knob off to the left, I believe. Okay, no spring in there. So here's our first bearing, and if you want to take that out, there is just this tiny little spring clip in there, and you just basically just stick a little you know, pair of tweezers, something like that. And you know what, we'll actually take it out of there because I can already see there's grease on it, and you don't really want grease on your bearings, just oil. And just be careful because this thing can fly out at you. So I just kind of hover my finger over it and just gently take it out of there. All right, have our little bearing remover tool and tester, which is pretty sweet. I'll link this little toolkit in the description for you. Works pretty good. A little bit of force, get it out of there. Come on, baby. So it's kind of stuck in there. There we go. All right, so there's our first bearing. We're just going to dry her off a bit. Man, Shimano always puts grease on everything, and I think it's just because they know that their products are going to be on a shelf and in transit for long periods of time, and they just don't want things drying up, so it's understandable. But when I first get a reel, I just like to clean all that off. All right, that's cool. Might actually dip into a little bit of a Q-tip here too. Thing's slippery. Cool. And then I'm just gonna kind of give it a little wipe on the inside there. Get whatever grease is out. And then let's oil up this bearing real fast. I like the Lucas reel oil here. I'll link that in the description as well. And this little tester is pretty sweet because you can just balance the bearing on it like this and, you know, test them out, stuff like that. These are brand new, so I'm sure they're pretty well off, but we're just gonna put a little bit of oil on that. Work it around a bit. That's probably good, but since I have problems, I'm just gonna put a little on the other side too. Nothing crazy, 1 or 2 drops. Just kind of work that in. All right, let's put this bad boy back in there. Snaps right in like that. Just make sure it's sitting all the way down. These tools are nice because you can just put a little pressure on it. Alrighty, this little clip. Fire that thing back in. Has a little bit of grease on it as well, so I'm just gonna gently wipe it off just because it's a very delicate little piece. And I'm just gonna lay that back in there. Slippery little sucker. And you just kind of work your way around until you hear it snap in, just like that. All right, so that bearing is all good. Now we are going to, you know what, we can get at this one first if you want. On the other side here, inside this door, you got another bearing. And I suppose I could take that out too. You really don't have to go through all the trouble, really, if you don't want. You can just kind of wipe it, make sure there's no grease. But it's the same story, just that little spring clip inside just pops out. And then you can just oil it. But you know what, there's not much grease on there, so this one I'm just gonna leave in. Put a little oil down in that bearing. Use my little tester to just get it in there and spin it around. Work that oil in. And that bearing's good. Lock that back up, and now it's time to get this cover off. See what we're looking like on the inside. Let's see if this one fits. Should. All right, so this one's got 2 screws on the top and then 2 on the back side, and one of them is going to be longer, and it's probably this one right here. So let's just start with these. And now when you do this, just make sure that you're not stripping these things out, because you know, when they first come out of the box here from the factory, they got a little Loctite on them, maybe they've never been broken loose before, so it's very easy to start stripping out these screws here. So really make sure you have the right screwdriver size anyway, and get some really good pressure on it, and then just slowly turn it with like little cranks, just kind of till it breaks loose. Yeah, see? Not quite getting it. They're tricky little suckers sometimes. I have to try a different size here. Sometimes you might even have better luck with that might fly, a flathead screwdriver on these. No, that ain't cutting it either. Let's go with the flathead. All right, come on, baby. There it is. Broke loose for the first time. That's what happens, man. And once you work on these things for a while, you kind of start to expect stuff like that. All right, so as always, I use this little area up here on this mat. This mat is great, dude. I'll link that in the description as well for you guys. But I always put them in the order of which I found them. Just makes life way easier. Let's try to get this second one to bust loose. Just make sure it's seated really well. Good grip. There it is. That is violent first time you do it. Scary. All right, so this one's just slightly above it. Now we roll to the back side here. Let's take this one. Nice. These are usually easier than those front covers. I might actually go back to the Phillips head, because once you break them loose, there we go. Once you break them loose, it's actually way easier to use the Phillips. All right. Let's go, baby. There's one, very short. And I'm gonna put them underneath here, so I know they're on the bottom. Well, that took a while to get off. I apologize, but you got to be careful. All right, there's the extra long one right there. So just remember, it's right down that little slope. That's the small one, long one, rather. All right, and away we go. Yep. A lot of grease. Man, that smells so weird. It smells almost like burning clutch in a car, something like that. Very odd. put this here to just balance this real fast. All right, so now inside here you have your one-way roller bearing, and there's just this little part in here that you need to take out first, which is going to sit into that washer eventually, but I'm just going to make sure that there's not a lot of crap on there. And you don't really oil the one-way roller bearings or grease, so any grease that's in there from the factory I just like to wipe off. Kind of keep it clean. I really like to pack that grease in there. Wipe this little part off. Cool. All right, now we're down to some fun stuff here, kids. Let's see. So we got the yoke springs. We're gonna take them off first. They are covered in grease. Gotta wipe those off. I'll do that first, that way I don't have to do it later. You're gonna put a little grease on there anyway, but just try to keep it clean. All right, so now this whole main drive here is just gonna slide right up. If it's stuck or giving you problems, you know, don't force it, don't go too nuts, but it should come up fairly easily. Just kind of put a little pressure on that and just kind of slowly pull up. Now underneath here, you're gonna have your ratchet, and lay it all down the way you found it, for sure. And then we're gonna have a drag washer underneath that probably. There it is. All right, so drag washer's coming off. We're gonna wipe the grease off of this ratchet and just be mindful of what side was facing down. I don't think it matters on these reels, but some of them have that specific pattern here in the ratchet, cog, whatever you want to call it, and it needs to hit the right spot. So some of them you'll see like a more pointed edge on this, but these are pretty even. I'm just gonna lay that down where it was. First drag washer, gently wipe the grease off, factory grease, and I'm gonna use specific drag reel grease on this stuff. These are just kind of carbon fiber washers. And when they're brand new also, you know, you're gonna see, you can actually see it on the paper towel already. Just some of that carbon fiber wiping off. So you wanna get all that new crap off before you throw some grease on there. All right, next up in here, we got our bigger drag washer. This thing's really covered in grease. Just gonna take that off. Whoa, interesting. They have an old school drag washer in this, not a carbon fiber. So if you want, you could probably hit up eBay or something like that and upgrade that at some point to a carbon washer. But I'm sure this one will get it done for a while at least. Now this piece here, you could tell it's like domed almost. You can kind of see like a more dome area here, and it kind of just bends over that way, and it goes the dome side facing down. That way this puts pressure on that drag washer. Jeez. Old school drag washer. How about that? Interesting. Just gonna wipe off any of the grease that's inside here. I'm just gonna wipe off the rest of this. These teeth, man, they should all be greased up and they are bone dry. It's so funny, man. Shimano loves to pack in grease, but they never seem to put it on some of the places that really matter. All right, beautiful, shiny. All right, so we're gonna take a little bit of our Cow's universal reel and star drag grease, and we're just gonna hit these washers real fast. Just take a little bit on your finger, dab some on, nothing crazy. And then you're just going to slowly work that into each washer. Just a very, very, very light coating. If you put too much, your drag will slip on you. And if you don't put any, your drag will probably be pretty badass and strong, but the washers aren't going to last. So it's just a tiny little coating that you want to do. And that's all. And this material just kind of soaks it up like a sponge. All right, there's one. I'm just going to put that right back where it belongs. And then the smaller one, bachelor number 2. Same deal. It's nice, clean, light coating. Just kind of work it in. If it starts to get a little too sloppy, then, you know, just wipe your fingers off on a paper towel and take off that excess. But it really likes to soak it up, so. Alrighty, that should be on top of that. This we can throw back into here. And this is gonna sit on that once we put it back together. Alright, so that's it for the old drag grease. Moving on. Alrighty, next up here we have the pinion gear and the yoke. The yoke is this pink piece here, and you just slowly pull up on that. Just kind of rest that down here. And we're just going to clean this off. Pinion gear, same deal. Taking off the factory stuff. Okay, so right here, there are these 2 little slides. I don't know if you can see. They're like little ramps. One here and one here. And that's how you know whether this is upside down or not, because you need these little pieces are shaped perfectly to fit on those ramps. So when you put it back together, that's how you know they're in the right spot. Over here, damn, look at, so see all that extra grease they got underneath there? It's wild, man. So we're just gonna take a Q-tip, clean that up a little bit. And they really got it in there. Jeez. I might need another little tool of the trade here in the form of a toothpick. These are great for getting into certain spots, getting grease out of areas that you don't want it to be in. Look at all that. All right. Good enough. All right, so now underneath here, you have another bearing. And to get at that, there are these 2 little screws here. And once you take these screws off, this whole clutch system can fly right off on you. The spring can go, all this stuff can fly off. So if you don't want to get in there, like, don't bother. You can still oil it from out here, and you can probably get at it from the other side too, but yeah, that's interesting. That's how you would replace that bearing. But I'm just gonna give it a quick wipe off, and I'm just gonna oil it right through here. When you're using Q-tips, sometimes the little fibers of the cotton can break off and stuff. So if you see any of that, like the little hairs looking like that, make sure you get them out of there. You don't want them in there. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to just sneak this little oil needle right off to the side here next to the black and onto the bearing. And just kind of let that run right down in there. All right. Little tool here and just work it in. Cool. All right, next up we're just going to throw a little bit of grease in certain areas here, and we'll be ready to put this thing back together. Some pen reel grease, good stuff. And then we're just going to take our little paintbrush here, take a little bit off here, and we're going to go back to where I wiped all that sloppiness off and just run right through these two cogs, just so they, right where they meet there. And it'll start spreading throughout both of them. Nothing crazy, nothing too much, but just a little bit there. Cool. Now, the rest of this stuff, some people like to put grease, some people like to put oil. I just end up putting a tiny little grease in this little area here, where this mechanism slides back and forth. Nothing sloppy, just a tiny little coating. Also over here on the little piece that makes your button work go up and down. A little bit on the spring. Just a very, very, very light coating. Very light. Cool. All right. Now, next up, we got our little pinion gear here, and we're just going to hit these teeth that run across the top. Turn a little bit of that, and just kind of pat it right in. Very light coating, because once we get it on the main gear, it's going to share it with this. So, all right, beautiful. Place that back down. Now those ramps that I mentioned earlier, where that yoke slides up and down, I just like to put a tiny little bit right on that ramp, tiny little bit right on that ramp, and just give it a little bit of love, just so it bounces off and on that, slides rather easily. All right, so that's cool. Now we're just going to take our pinion, make sure this thing's facing the right side up. You know the ramps match. Slide that in there. And then we're just going to slowly slide this thing back on these posts. And then it should just slide right down. Just like that. And then I'll just put a tiny little bit around these posts. Nothing crazy though. All right, I'm not going to put the springs on yet because I'm not quite ready to lock this thing up, but those are going to go right on top of those posts. Alrighty, I'm going to use this as like a little balance beam again. So next up we got our main gear here, and we're just going to hit those teeth. You don't want to get it all over the bottom, you don't want to get it on the top, you want these teeth. So just gently try to get some of that in there. And so you can do this a couple different ways too. You can kind of just pat this stuff on like this, and then take your finger and rub it so it just sits all that grease into those teeth. Or you can individually just go around and paint them. And you don't have to work every square inch of this. because it's all gonna start to mix together when the reel starts moving. But you definitely wanna hit the majority of the teeth. Make it nice and smooth for you. All right, it's looking pretty good. Couple more spots, I think, and we're good, baby. All right, man. Looks good to me. Gonna take any excess that may have gotten on the bottom off. Just keep it clean. Same thing with the top. All right. Wipe my hand off here. And now, really, you could have put this on first and then did this. That way you don't have to hold it in your hand, but either way. So first, before you slide that thing on, you have this little ratchet with the drag washer. Now you're just going to place that down like that. And you're going to want this thing to sit squared and keyed. So you just kind of move it until it absolutely sits flush, just like that. Hopefully you can see that. If that's not sitting completely flush, it's not going to catch this little mechanism here. So if you just, you know, put it down and it's sitting like that, you could end up putting this thing back together and it's not going to work right. So you just want to hold this, keep it still, and just slowly rotate that so the key matches up square and square. And that way it's sitting completely flat. And you take your drag washer, get that in on top. Make sure it's flush. Then we're going to slide on our main gear, which is also keyed. You just put a little bit of a shimmy to get that on there. And it just slides down gently next to that pinion gear. And sometimes you might have to pull this pinion gear off to the right a little bit just to get these teeth to match up, but usually it slides in. And then you can see how that big main gear interacts with the pinion gear, and that's how your reel works. And as this completely, you know, rotates over and over and over, it's going to spread all that grease around everything. And sometimes if you put too much, you'll get a little bit of a buildup of it right here. So you can always just, you know, take that off, and you'll even start to see it happen as this turns. You see it starting to build up on the pinion gear? Crazy, right? That's how fast it happens. Imagine how fast this thing's actually turning when you're using it. All right, so let me just clean this off real fast. And I'm just gonna take some of that extra chunkage off. Clean off my brush. That should just be about it for the grease. All right, so this thing's ready to rock and roll, man. We just got to throw our springs on. Those little posts there. We should be good to go. All right. Let's get this cover back on, huh? Which way does this go? Oop, almost forgot a very, very big step. I'm so sorry. This piece right here, this little forked area, those two little teeth, sit right in there. Don't forget about that. Just kind of wiggle it in until it really sits. Now we're ready to put the cover back on. Just a little bit of a shimmy. just gonna sit in there for you. The springs, everything, just gonna make sure that's nice and seated. A bit of a space on this one. Sometimes you might just have to gently work it around just like that until you hear a good little snap. All right, so let's get these screws back in. We will start on the back side here. Remember, the long one was down on the bottom of that slope. So we will start with that. Oops. Sometimes those are kind of a pain to get in. When you tighten those up, don't over tighten them. Tight is tight. Sometimes I like to use these tweezers just to help me sit these screws in here because I have fairly big hands. Tight is tight. Off to the front side, everything's in the right order, which is sweet. See, there is just absolutely no guessing where each screw goes. Come on, baby. Oop. That's how easy it is for something to take off on you. Come on. Tight is tight. Come on. Okay. Sweet. All right, so what else we got going on here? Cover's back on. We can put our tension knob back on before we put the handle on because it's way harder to do so once we put the handle on. That turns down to the right. What else do we need to do here? You know what, I might open this back up real fast. Oh, they already have some actually, but I just like taking a tiny little bit of grease and just hitting that inside area in the spring just to keep some waterproofing going on. I'm just basically using theirs there. All right, that looks good. Lock that back up. We're almost there, man. Just got to get the handle on, oil a couple more things, and we're good, dude. So we oiled all three of the bearings there. We got that one done, that one done, that one done. And now we're ready to put this back on. Let's see. So first things first. Got our little spring washers in the order they came. These are kind of tricky. Remember, they're cupped, so they kind of sit like almost like parentheses on each other. It just helps give you a little more spring tension. Little washer there with the nut. Copper side down. I'm just gonna slightly get that on there, spinning to the left. And you don't have to use a tool to tighten this down all the way. You just kind of hold this with your hand and then just slightly tighten that, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be cranked. So this is still in the right position. You got that little groove facing up, and that's what seats your spring in there. Just like that. Time for the old star drag. Now this is kind of usually a balancing act, you know, you just kind of keep your finger on that so that little pin doesn't explode out of there, just like that. And then just put a little tension down and just kind of make sure it sits all the way down. And then you just keep tension. Get your handle on. And then I just like to shift my fingers to distribute the tension. There you go. Got our nut. Now it's going to be tightening to the left. See that? All right. Now, this is a good little trick here. To line up this next cap piece, it's gonna have to fit perfect over this nut. And I think a lot of times if you point, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points on this shape here. And you're gonna, tighten it to where it feels snug. But once you start getting down to the bottom of it and it's really tight, you're going to want to try to line up one of those points with that hole right there, usually. All right. So now, if that's not in the right spot, it's going to be hard to get that other one on. All right, that's pretty close. Let's see. See how that's got that shape in there? It's got to slide perfectly right over that for it to sit. All right, so we're a little off right now. You don't want to force that. See that space in there? You want that to sit flush, so I probably over tightened it a little. There it is, right there. You'll know because it just goes on so easy when it's in the right position. And like I said, that point, one of those 6 points is pointed directly at that hole. And that's usually how you know it's gonna be good. So you don't even have to play that game. Our little screw here with some Loctite in it. Drop that on in. Come on, baby. Make sure that's nice and flush. Cool. Tighten up that drag a bit. Yeah, everything looks good. Cool. And we're just gonna get our spool in. Actually, you know what? Before we put the spool in, just drop a little oil on this worm gear here. A little off to the side over here. A little off to the side on this. Just hit both sides of it, work that in for a second. Okay. And then get our spool back in. No bearing on the spool, right? No. Sit that. Close up our door here. And then one last little thing I like to do is I'd like to put one little drop of oil on these little knobs here, right where it meets the handle. Just kind of work them around. I use gravity just to keep them down. All right, man. Slippery. Nice. And that's pretty much it. Pretty simple reel. This is one of my favorite reels, man. For the price, I don't really think there's a better reel out there, in my opinion. I think these are like $129.99. Man, this thing bombs. It's definitely one of my favorite reels by far. Small, light, clean. Great little reel for sure. Nice. All right, man, so out of the box, that's how they come, and that's how I like to just kind of tune them up, get them ready. You know, they're pretty simple, but great little reels. All right, I guess that wraps it up. Hope you guys got something out of this. Once again, I'll link all this stuff in the description, all the tools I use, the oil, the grease, the mat, everything I got going on here, I will link in the description. And yeah, man, I hope this helped you out. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like and let us know in the comments. And if you're into this sort of thing, don't forget to hit subscribe. We put a new video out every week. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Later.
If you want to see more videos just like this one, be sure to check out the rest of the Where We Wild YouTube channel, where we post a brand new video every week. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified whenever we post a new adventure. Thanks for watching.